Hi, and welcome to Misfortune's Corner. I'm Taylor, one of the creators of this podcast series, and I'd like to take a moment to thank you, the listener, for being a part of this experience. It's obviously the fact that you're listening to this makes it all worth it, so I'd like to thank you for that. I'd also like to spend a moment to explain how things are going to work here at Misfortune's Corner. We will have a series of podcasts, for now 2 podcasts, that will be featured here on Misfortune's Corner. The first is the one that you're listening to right now, Heads of House, where 3 DMs talk about the ins and outs of DMing as well as being players, and eventually, as we gain a listener base, things that you guys want to hear about. But for now, we have a prepared list, so we hope you enjoy. Coming down the line is going to be a podcast following a campaign, edition to be determined. We're bouncing between 3.5 and 5e at the moment, but we will let you know as that gets closer. But for now, just stay tuned, and we hope to entertain. And for the first of what I hope to be many times, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Misfortune's Corner. Welcome to Heads of House. I am Taylor, and I will be your DM this evening.
I'm Steve. I'm also a DM, but just discussing with a couple of friends.
And my name's Jaren. I also DM and play for quite a while. Big part of my life. I've been playing, and it's a great game.
I guess I'll start.
Yeah.
I started playing in 2004. So I've been playing for almost 15 years on and off. I've had periods of my life where it just hasn't been as readily available as I would have liked. And I run one game currently, a 3.5 campaign, and I'm playing in 2 others.
I've been playing D&D for 12 years now, going on 13. I was mainly a player, and then in the past year and a half, I DM'd my first 3.5 game, and now I'm DMing a 5th edition game for the first time as well. I've also played in 5th edition and majority of the time in 3.5.
I have been playing since 2013. I only played a couple hours worth then, and then 3 years later I really started playing, so I've been playing for about 4 years. 3 of that I have been DMing, but I also play in a handful of 3.5 campaigns as well as my first 5e campaign. So.
And so yeah, Dungeons and Dragons is something we all have come to love as a passion, which is why Taylor has invited us on to do this project with him. Because we've all enjoyed sitting around and discussing for probably too much time, late into the nights or
After games.
after games. We just we'll just sit around and talk about different things about what's going on in our other games, or
That's not even including our Discord time.
all of the chats we have going on in Discord, and and so it's all good. It's all good and fun though.
I believe, so this week we've got lined up for our talking points pregame overview. And it looks like we have a couple of bullet points listed out on there, but our first one would be player expectations. And I didn't put this one on the list, but I'm assuming that's player expectations moving into a new game.
That's kind of what I figured with it. It's setting the expectations for the campaign before the campaign. Giving them your homebrew rules and letting them know what material is and isn't allowed in the campaign. things of that nature, just so that they have an idea coming in and what
Right.
they need to research into their characters.
Well, yeah, as well as the players giving us as a DM some of the things they would like to see, what they would like to do, what types of themes maybe they want to see throughout the campaign.
A quick note, I think important to clarify is most of our talking points are going to be revolving around how we believe to run a successful game. I think that's an accurate statement. And so I guess for the first little bit until we get listener input, we're kind of just going to explain our experience and our thoughts on running a productive and interesting game, and we hope to help any aspiring DMs out there as well as any players listening, because the game goes both ways, the sword cuts both ways. You can't have a good game without good players and a good game without a good DM. So
Yeah, it really requires everyone coming together to be a cohesive unit to be able to run a successful game, because nothing feels worse than putting all the effort in to set up a game, have a few sessions, and then it just falls apart. People start skipping, and it's not their priority to come. Because I'm making it a priority as a DM to be there, to do the work, homework, everything, and then people just dissolve from the group.
well, and it definitely kind of like hurts as a storyteller when you tell this story and just, especially when the whole group isn't buying in, but when particular players don't buy in, it's kind of like, hey, what am I doing wrong? Why am I not entertaining here?
Yeah, well, and it also goes both ways. I mean, players, you got to put in your homework. I mean, if you're building a character for this story, you want to be a part of the story. And if you have something you want for your character, best way to find out if it's allowed is just to reach out to your DM and say, hey, I have this idea. I want to take a dip into this as a multi-class. Are you going to be okay with that? And the DM will say, sure. Or if it's a specialized class, like, say, a wizard, he'll give you an option for finding a mentor or something like that within the campaign that you can make that happen.
Well, it goes back to the mentality that if you don't ever ask, you won't ever know.
Exactly.
But leading that in, our first point is player expectations. So player expectations moving into a campaign. I guess, Jaron, what do you think players should be doing before a campaign to establish what they want?
So when I go into a game as a player and I start looking at what type of class I want to make, the first thing I do is envision, who he is, what he looks like, what is he doing with his life. And you're like, okay, maybe this happens to him, and as a result, he, does this, or he has a near-death experience, and he finds he has magical abilities, and he's a sorcerer, So you got to think of like what are you trying to personify in this game, and then you run it by the DM, be like, hey, this is what I'm planning. Here's my backstory, because the backstory can help the DM so much.
Oh, it's so.
And so, as a player, I would also expect the DM to acknowledge that backstory and be able to incorporate certain elements of that backstory into it that can help drive a story, and then it helps me as a player feel like the DM wants me at the table.
I guess same question for Steve.
I feel like not only should a player be looking at their backstory and their character, they should be potentially planning for the future in the campaign. Looking at, say, you start at first level, but look at maybe at 8th level you want to take a little bit of a turn to something else, and kind of helping the DM prepare for that. Because as a DM, we can wing it, we can pull things out of thin air, but if you're not helping us find options for that, it makes it a lot harder for us to say, hey, that's a cool idea, let's
Right.
make it happen.
Yeah, and I agree with that, planning ahead. And one thing that happened in the recent 5th edition campaign I was playing a bard rogue, a multi-class character. And I was getting close to the 3rd level for rogue, get the archetype, and I was going to do the Inquisitor, if I remember correctly. Because I was setting up this whole underground criminal network. But then one of our party members, as a part of the story, betrayed us all. He sent us to Shadowfell, and then the player brought in a new character, and he became a enemy NPC. And so then I went the assassin archetype because I wanted to hunt him down. So it was also planning ahead, but then also being like, okay, this happened. Maybe my character will go this route.
I think that's brings up a really good point about player expectations for a campaign. Is like oftentimes players start a campaign with more or less a character map, and I think it's good to have that map because it gives you some directionality and some focus with the character. But at the same time, I think it's crucial to role playing as well as personal character development, developing the character personally, where you don't follow your plan to the letter because it's your plan. You kind of go into a game with the expectation that what happens in here might alter what I decide to do with the character. They might completely change course. Exactly.
And what was in that 3.5 campaign, you two joined in to a little bit later, but previously they've been doing all this stuff, and then all of a sudden they got a hold of a boat and they're like, we want to be pirates. I've never done anything with water mechanics or boat mechanics in a D&D game ever. And so I had to go through and read all this stuff, and it's pretty extensive in 3.5, and it's a little confusing. And so, but they wanted to go be pirates, and they ended up, acquiring a lot of ships and running their own pirate organization. And it was all new to me as a DM, but the players wanted to go that route. They took that turn into let's be pirates.
Well, and then the campaign took another turn when the two of us joined, and it then became a landlocked.
Yeah, and then you guys started building a town, and it became a large village and all that stuff. And you guys were like, we don't want to go on the boats anymore.
Well, and I think that kind of transitions into our next point, unless you guys have something else. But DM expectations. As a DM, I think that you enter a game with complete expectation for whatever you have planned to not happen.
Right. And that's why I always have at least a few pages of a document explaining what my world is, because I only run homebrew stuff. I'm almost intimidated by the modules, because I almost feel like it's more work, because you have to sit there and study through all that.
Well, you have to learn the module and not just know your world.
Exactly. And so I'm creating this world, right? And I give them the expectations like, okay, this is how you do character creation. This is how I do your HP every level. This is how I do this. This is what isn't allowed. This is something I'm allowing that isn't raw or official content and stuff like that. It's very important to be able to have that stuff lined out, and then that they have read that. Because I will expect them to have read that by the time we meet the first time.
Well, and I think that's fair. I think it's fair as a DM that if you take the time to prepare a pregame whatever, that the players read it, because they're going to be participating in this world you've created. It's only fair that they read the rules.
Well, and if they don't read the rules, they're not going to understand some of the things that you might have in there that are your homebrew rules that could be really amazing things. Like the campaign that I run, my 3.5 campaign, I gave all my players, which you both play in, a bonded magical item that scales with your character. So as you level, it levels. If they hadn't read the document before, they wouldn't have understood, hey, I'm going to get this killer item that is going to be, by the time I level 20, a Godslayer item, essentially.
Well, it also takes away from the time. It takes away time from the first session, because then you have to sit there and explain it to them when you could have already been moving on to other things.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think that it's really important to know those things up front, because if a player understands how the rules work, they know how to react to them. Steve would know this. In my campaigns, I run a homebrew rule, and I state it up front in most cases. You came into the campaign later, so you didn't get the upfront explanation on this, but a homebrew rule that I run and that I expect players to know is critical fails in combat result in a attack of opportunity from the enemy. In my mind, it's you fumble, the enemy gets to take advantage of that. And I've caught players off guard with it before because they don't don't remember. They don't remember, oh yeah, that's a rule. And they run into combat and they're like, oh, I failed, but it's no big deal. I'm like, actually, they just critted on you. So, like, understanding DM rules, and I guess that kind of moves into our next point, but I'm not sure if we're ready to move into that or not. But
I think one of the things that I've done is I've taken one of the components from 5th edition, the short rest and long rest concept, and put it into my 3-5 campaign because I think it works, and I think it's more beneficial to the players. It allows them more time to play their characters, more time to role play than sitting there worrying about, crap, when am I going to heal? How am I going to heal?
Right.
I'd rather have a good flow to the campaign, good storytelling, and good party dynamic rather than worrying about trivial little items.
yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And there's always certain elements that a DM is going to like that, they've learned from a different DM or they've read somewhere or they come up with it. Like for my HP rolls, every time you level up, I roll the same hit die as the person rolling. And if you roll your con mod or lower, like say for example you have a constitution modifier of 2, you roll 2 or lower, you re-roll it. And then I re-roll it too if I have the same rolls. And then that person can choose my roll or his roll without knowing my roll. So there's always that chance they get better HP or not. And I feel like it's certain things like that can add different flavors or give the advantage because all of a sudden they can gain a little bit more hit points than they would have gotten.
That's something, like that specifically is something that I thoroughly enjoyed in your campaign. And I've not so much in my current 3-5 campaign because I just gave them max health. I didn't want to deal with it.
Oh, okay.
But in one-shots I've ran, that's a rule that I've used. And it's a rule that players seem to really enjoy. And I think it's things like that that really define or set DMs apart, is little rules that set them apart. And I think before we move on to perhaps more of our homebrew explanations, is there anything from our first 2 points of player expectations and DM expectations, are there any bullet points that you would think would be, like if you had to give a DM or players advice moving into a campaign, what would be like your top advice? I guess your top 2 points.
You want to do the player or do you want to do the DM?
I'll do player. Yeah.
Okay.
As a player, top 2 things are both going to be the exact same point: research and research. I mean, if you don't know how your character plays, you're going to show up to the first session and you're going to spend the next 5 sessions trying to figure out just the basics of your character. Take just a couple of hours before you get into the session, read through the description of your race, read through the description of your class, and know the limitations of your character. Because if you don't know those things, I mean, I've watched many podcasts where the players don't know what their character can do, and they spend time arguing with the DM and taking away from the campaign.
Yeah, and for the DM, for expectations, I think one of them is be able to set clear expectations for your party that's with you. Know what they want, know what you want. You definitely need to know what you're doing. If you don't, take time and research. And the second point would be be prepared to invest a lot of time into it. It is a lot of work to run a campaign. At work, because I carry around 2 booklets. One of them is for the current campaign I'm running, where I start writing and creating encounters. The other booklet is for ideas I'm throwing around, like custom classes I'm creating, or magic item ideas, or all these different things. And so when I work at a school, and so when they're all in class, and I'm just a staff there, so I get to sit around in the class, and I just start to write stuff. And so you got to be able to be prepared to put in the time and to do what you need to do to create a successful campaign.
Well, I think you both covered the points I wanted to on both ends. Like in my mind, both as a player and a DM, there's nothing about the game that drives me more insane than when another player at the table cannot play their character.
Oh yeah.
And so I think research, be prepared to play your character. And on the DM side of things, there's nothing more really I showed up for this than a DM going, okay, let me put something together real quick. It just shows, okay, obviously if it has
being the DM for you guys, I had to do that all the time.
Well, when players surprise you though, that's just part of DMing.
It was like
improving.
90% of the games with you guys, I was having to come up with crap.
When you show up to a game,
oh yeah,
like you're there at the start, and at the very start of a game, the DM doesn't know what they're doing that day. That's kind of like,
yeah,
okay, I took the time to research where my character's going.
oh yeah,
You didn't take the time to plan out whatever was going on. And for me, that's horrible to see a DM do. Obviously, improvisation happens as a DM because players throw a curveball at you. They drop an elemental on your end game boss. But
yep, with thousands and tens of thousands worth of damage. And
I calculated it was over 3 million points of damage.
That's right. Yeah, from the crushing damage.
And so, like, there are obviously some things you can't plan for, but I think going in, you had the encounter planned.
Yeah.
And that's what players look for. They want to know that you have a plan, not you're making it up as we go. And so I think
exactly
the overall for expectations is just research, know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, okay, I actually have one more point for DM expectations is being able to explain what type of story you're running, right? Some DMs really, do well with voice acting. I was talking to a guy. I am horrible at it, but I was at a game store and I was talking to this other guy who has started chartering his services, in game shops where people pay him to come DM, and we were talking about how different our 2 DM styles are, where his is very RPG, voice acting, story driven, and mine's more adventure, hard combats to put your lives in peril and use that to drive the stories. And so there's 2 huge contrasts that you can come, and then obviously there's crossover and stuff, but some DMs always lean to one side or the other a little bit more.
Well, and I'd like to tack on like a little sub note on that. I think it's important for the DM to clearly explain to the players what not their DM style, but what style of campaign it's going to be. Because I think a lot of people don't realize there are different styles of campaign. Mm-hmm. There's what I would call a chapter campaign, where the DM has a story written out and you're going through it chapter by chapter, and while the players can more or less do what they want, they're really just playing characters in this story. Then you have open world campaigns where you can go and do what you want, and the DM just adapts and
which is what I tend to fancy. And there's always things going around in the background. If you don't go pursue that bad guy, he's still doing bad things, and you may cross him in the future, and he could have raised a city.
But there's a stark difference between how the campaign operates.
Exactly.
A story campaign, like you might choose to go and do this, but you're not going to move on in the world until you complete objective. Whereas in like an open world,
Mm-hmm.
you could completely ignore the
And
objective.
there's
for-
going to be
for a
another
long
objective
time,
somewhere
and
else.
You'll find a different objective
Yeah,
somewhere and might
exactly.
not ever even come back to the objective. And so I think it's important for DMs to explain what style of story they're going to be telling. That way players know how to interact with the story.
Right.
And I think that, for me, I think that wraps.
Well, I think that, well, yeah, but I also think that's why
Expectations,
your
but-
character, my character, and Seth's character in the game work really well
Well,
in
worked
Steve's
really well in
campaign,
his campaign.
because we're basically the golden children for
Oh,
that campaign.
Well, our characters are more focused on the goals of the campaign rather than
Mhm.
doing what our characters want. We've aligned our characters' desires with
Hmm.
the campaign objective.
And so then that also makes it easiser for Steve over here
I
to.
can throw fish
Right.
hooks and say, hey, this little boy needs help finding his sister.
the children are being kidnapped
Abducted.
and three adventures, weapons already out.
Yeah, because we're
Where
all
are they?
we're all like good characters to a certain
Well,
extent.
even if we're not
We're-
goody good, it's,
we're just gonna fight
we're
evil.
out for the greater good, or at
Yeah.
least the sense of greater good.
And
And I think having that, forethought of, okay, is this story driven or open
Yeah.
world, definitely allows players to decide how they're going to react to hooks.
Yeah. Well, and as a DM, if you're playing a story-driven campaign, you really have to know your characters. You have to know their quirks and what will get them to do something.
Yeah.
You know, some characters are driven by greed. You throw 10,000 gold in front of them, they're gonna be like, "Holy shit, I'm going."
I'll
there."
do anything.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that kind of ties into
Oh, we're gonna
like,
brothel for that.
Yeah.
if you know that if you know that a character is this way,
Yeah.
nothing the player characters do could influence that.
Yeah.
It like no matter how charismatic or convincing a player is, they're not going to convince the NPC that has this deep-seated hatred of elves. They're not going to convince them to suddenly go trapezing off with an elf caravan.
Yeah.
So knowing your characters in a story-driven is definitely important. But
Okay.
homebrew explanations. I think we've kind of covered a little bit of this, just
Yeah.
explaining homebrew rules, and I think
Yeah.
importantly why that rule is there, not just that it's there, but why it's there.
Yeah, and I think you also have to be able to explain why and how it fits and works with the official rules, and or what it's replacing, and you got to be able to explain all that stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes if you're gonna homebrew something and you get this just wild hair and you think of something in the middle of the campaign and you say, you know what, this would be a really cool idea. Don't just drop it on your players and say, guess what, this is a new rule. Say, hey, this is something that came to me, I think it's a really cool concept. What do you guys think? Get their opinions on how it's going to affect gameplay, their characters, so on and so forth, so that you're not really disrupting the campaign, but making it a more enjoyable experience for everyone.
Well, and I think that it's at that, like, if you come up with rules mid-campaign, like, and I try to do this in End of Days, but, like, if I come up with a rule, I run it past the group. I'm like, hey, what does everybody think about this? And then usually I give it a trial period. I'm kind of like, hey, we're going to play this for a week or two,
Mm-hmm.
see how it goes, but if it ultimately doesn't work, we'll drop it.
Yeah.
But I think definitely seeing what your players think about something is important when it comes to introducing homebrew rules, unless of course it's like your steadfast opening rules. Opening rules, it's the player's job to deal with that, unless the players feel like a rule is unfair.
Yeah, and I still think it should be up to the DM to make sure that those rules are fair and they don't detract from gameplay.
And that they're explained properly, because while it may make sense to me, it could be a little bit more difficult to understand
Yeah.
for one of the players.
Very true.
I do think it is really important though to, like, kind of like you said, how it interacts with rules as written, because some rules, thinking of an example, for the listeners, I'm extraordinarily new to 5e, so I'm sorry, but most of my examples are going to be 3-5. But
I think a good one's grapple. It's a little confusing even for the seasoned 3.5 player.
I've honestly never played a character that excessively uses grapple, so it's not a rule I'm familiar with.
It's a long. There's like 8 different steps to it.
Yeah, I saw a meme about this today, and it showed 2 books side by side. One that's like 8 inches thick, and one that's just barely like 6 pages.
Yeah.
And it's 3-5 grapple versus any other systems grapple.
Well, and like grapple, it's a complex rule, but like a rule that I've personally changed in my campaigns was carrying capacity. For me, nothing is more annoying to me than keeping track of details that don't need to be kept track of. And so
You just get a bag of holding, dude.
Well, I'll give you a bag of, but I've more or less dropped series of rules for bags of holding. Like, for me, it's like, okay, if I as a DM think logically your character would be able to carry whatever they're carrying, go for it. If logically I think that the bag of holding could hold what you have in it, go for it. But if you're going to try and shove I'm forgetting the name of the creature, but basically if you're trying to shove a hell giant in a bag of holding, I'm going to tell you no.
Right, well,
So,
it'll die.
Well,
That's the
even
obviously, but yes.
Okay, sorry, if you're trying to shove a hill giant corpse into this bag of holding, I'm going to tell you no.
Luther.
And while my homebrew rules aren't keeping track of things like material components or carrying capacity or weapon hardness or weapon hit points.
Yeah.
Right.
I still expect you to follow rules of you're not going to use your longsword to pry open the steel door.
Yeah, it has a good chance of breaking.
And so like my homebrew rules on that are like, hey, I'm not going to follow all these little nitty gritty things, but there's a chance that you're not going to be able to carry it or this and that. And I think explaining how those rules interact or cover rules as written is
we were just, we were in the Discord just today, we were talking about the
evasion.
evasion rules in 3.5 and as well as in 5th edition it carries over where, a save isn't scotch free. If you have like improved evasion or anything, it's minimum damage.
Yeah,
so
you're still
10d6
standing
is
in the middle of a
fireball.
explosion.
Yeah, so 10d6 you take 10 damage, 10 1 die rolls.
Well, and I've heard, specifically on evasion, I've heard arguments on both sides for evasion saying when you use evasion, it's not you running out of the area or dodging, it's you like ducking behind some form of cover. But then my thought on that is, okay, what if you're in a room, just
with
like
no cover,
a bare room, and you're in the middle of the room, like you're not gonna suddenly dive into a pocket in the ground and avoid all the damage. And so I think there are gaps in the rules, especially in 3.5, where there's room for a DM to say, okay, you know what, this really doesn't make sense to me, so we're going to do this. But at the same time, it's like, okay, a player chose this class because of these features, and unless I state up front that this is how this ability is going to function, it's not really fair as a DM to go, okay, you know what, we're changing this now that we're a couple levels in because I don't like how it works.
Well, and now when it starts to become relevant, I mean, to an extent, the first few levels, you're not going to encounter area of effect spells. You're not going to be getting hit by fireballs. You're not going to be catching cloud kill spells.
Well, and if you are, either the DM or the players are doing something very wrong.
Yeah.
They're
Your
picking
DM just wants to quit DMing.
that, or you're just picking the fight with the wrong people.
Because I think we all know a player that has picked fights with wrong people. For me, it's Fen. Fen picks fights with the wrong people.
Yeah.
But he gets away with it because he's a charming individual.
Well, that's why I feel like my character in Steve's campaign is going to be getting closer and closer to doing that kind of stuff as he gets, a little bit more brazen in his personality, and he's a paladin and he's out to just enact justice on everybody. And then he got one hit and he was almost dead,
Well,
like negative to almost where he died score.
Yeah.
Well, and knowing knowing who you based Roaring on,
Yep.
Yeah.
It completely fits that
Yeah.
arrogance, that
Yeah,
pride.
because Escanor from the Seven
Very
Deadly Sins, you want to be very arrogant, and why would I be scared of you? You should be scared of me.
Why would I hate someone who's obviously weaker than myself?
Exactly.
And the way I say it, I actually like Roran's character because he's one of the easiest to bait.
I know,
throw
right?
Any kind of injustice, any kind of evil, you say goblins are terrorizing this village.
He's like, let's go.
And he is the first one running out the door with his sword drawn to go and kill goblins.
It's literally a hook without any worms on it, any bait.
It's like a piece of bread on the end of a line, and you're
just-
drawing it in front of a seagull.
Well, honestly, with Roaring, it's you throw a hook out there and there's nothing on it.
Yeah.
Roaring just goes,
And he's like-
look, a hook!
He's like, I smell evil. Let's go.
It's Cagrog. Not so much anymore, but he used to get the party in so much trouble. I would throw flavor text into the description of the scenery, and he would attack it. He would attack the flavor text, which I knew what the flavor text was, but they didn't. And they, as a level 8 party, they ended up fighting a frost worm.
Yeah, that's fun.
And so, every campaign has a player that gets the party into trouble. To some degree, it was Briggs in your campaign. His need to constantly be the first one in and to fight the biggest thing.
He just
there.
wanted to fight.
Where I felt like Malvin came in and was almost trying to be the babysitter.
Well, there's also always that character in your world too, and sometimes they can be a little controlling, and I really don't like playing with those people because I don't want them to tell me how to play my character.
Exactly.
And it's like, you don't tell me how to play my character, I don't tell you how to play your character. You're not my mom.
Well, and I think it's important to note a difference, and I guess we're probably getting onto other points, but whatever. Is that there's a difference. It's important to be able to discern the difference between a player trying to tell you what to do and a character telling you what to do. Because I definitely have characters that are very much like, okay, you idiot, stop doing that, or I'm going to stop healing you.
Yeah.
Whereas me as a person, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, what you're doing annoys the hell out of me, but it's your character. Do what you want.
Exactly.
Eventually, my character will probably stop healing you, and then it's your issue.
Well, and I've had situations. My first real experience with 5e was a campaign that I dropped after 3 sessions. The players didn't know their characters. The DM didn't know their characters. The DM had played maybe 10 sessions total, and his entire ruling when anybody said, hey, this is what the book says on this, was, doesn't matter, I'm the DM. But he never set down the expectations of anything homebrew before.
Yeah, and it ruined it for you. You dropped it, and so you were like, I don't want to play in here anymore. And then you formed your own group and asked me to DM that one.
Well, and I think that brings us back to the point we were talking about, where it's important to define these rules, and especially players and DM. While the DM more or less is God of the world, it doesn't give them free reign to steamroll players
Right.
for any
Yeah,
reason.
it's like you got to realize the limitations and put them on yourself and hold yourself to them. Maybe that character did annoy you. He's going to know if you're targeting him, though, and you're going to ruin the experience for him. And if it's that bad, have a real talk with him instead of being petty.
Well,
yeah.
And
even on that though, kind of sidelining into targeting, and I just have a bullet point on that. There's a character in the campaign I run. He knows, like 100%. I've straight up told him I'm gunning for his character, but the thing is, I don't focus. It's the whole character at this point. It's not just the raptor. It's the entire character. But he knows that while I'm gunning for him, I'm not singling him out.
yeah,
And
exactly.
I think Steve can attest to that. I don't target any one individual in combat. This player knows I'm trying to kill him, but I'm not
He's not the sole
going
that's
out of
when-
my way to do
and that's where as a DM you want to play the monsters or enemies as intelligent as they actually are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that, and that's my bullet on it. Like, I think targeting is okay, but as long as you're not
Yes, I agree.
singling that player out.
Yeah,
Just to throw a situation out there, you run into a chamber with a wizard. A character says something that sets the wizard off. The wizard has a golem behind him, and he says, "Crush that character because you just set off the wizard." That's not singling someone out. That's just targeting based on the situation.
the actions. Yeah, the situation, the actions. Where if they hadn't have said that, then golem wouldn't be sent to attack them.
And I think that that's a good marker, is that while if a certain character drives a DM insane, and they can go through several levels of the campaign, and that character not be dead, I think that shows anyone, especially people who think that their DM's targeting them, the fact that their character's alive means that the DM doesn't have that out for them.
Yeah, he's not singling
But-
anyone out.
Sorry, I kind of
No,
sidetracked it there.
What, we got sidetracked? No.
We never get sidetracked.
Never. Not even when we play D&D.
Not even that.
All right. So. All
I
right.
think that's all I had
Yeah.
for homebrew interactions. It's a pretty simple concept. Just explain up front your changes to rules as written.
And make sure they understand.
Yeah. And perhaps open it up to the table to determine whether or not they all agree to those rules. Because at least at my table, there are some rules I'm like, not a chance that is happening. Don't care what you think about it.
Generally.
But there are other rules that I'm like, okay, you know what? If the table in general does not like this,
Yeah.
Oh, like my campaign, homebrew, I gave everybody a horse and a couple of potions to start. And, I mean...
I didn't like that. I'm just kidding.
Okay,
I dissent.
Rowan
I'm
just
just kidding.
suffered a hemorrhage and is dead.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And for me, when I go into a game, and if I know the homebrew rules are set up before I create my character, even if they're not my favorite or I don't like some of them, I will accept them because they are laid out like that.
well, occasionally I'll suggest an alternative. Like I suggested crit ones do attacks of opportunity to you.
Yeah.
And it hasn't come up yet because honestly the players are really good in combat. It's the classic case of it's a bumbling circus until we're combat and then we're a death squad.
I don't know about that. I'm starting an order of knights. We're very serious people. We are very big time zealots. We don't mess around.
Well,
you just run around screaming praise the sun.
Yeah,
That's my cousin.
I'm really looking forward to the Night Order, personally. I think this is going to be a lot of fun for me as the DM to be able to say, you have all these knights, well, guess what? You now have an order in opposition to this, which already exists.
Right.
Roran's character is very familiar with it, as
Well,
well as his village.
I also like, as a DM, when I see people do stuff like that, because it shows that they are invested in their character, they are showing creativity, and they are wanting to progress in the storyline.
Oh yeah, and as the DM, you're like, this is sweet. This gives me tons to go on. I mean, I can build 3 or 4 separate story arcs just off of this one thing.
Right.
Um,
Okay, next one, I guess.
Next one, character creation. I think that we've slightly covered some of this, but I think that character creation is probably the most, I would say, conflicting.
Yeah, I think it can be a little bit of a heated moment.
Player and
Yeah.
a DM.
Like you can get some heated moments because maybe they want to do something and you say no. And so they want to do that and you say no.
Well,
but they want to do it, you know.
And they want to do it. And our first little sub point on that, I think, covers this is material exclusion.
That's when you say no to certain
I
things.
think up front, included in your homebrew explanations, is where you say, this material is not allowed.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Exactly.
can throw out a great example from my campaign. I excluded summoners and I excluded psionics, and that was set up before anybody even decided their characters. It was in the
Mhm.
document.
That was
sent
set up
everyone.
before anyone. That was set up before the campaign was even made available to any of
Yes.
us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in my 5e campaign, I set up, only published material, official,
Mhm.
and then, the girl in the group, she asked me, can I play the Unearthed Arcana Ranger? I looked at it and I said, yes, because I was interested to see how to play it. And then I also allow this version of a shaman I found I think works really well. It's very balanced and it's very effective. And so, and I was like, these are the 2 exceptions.
Well, you also made an exception for my character. You said only good aligned characters. And I explained, based on my backstory, how I wanted to take a character who came from an evil background, but through making a pact with the Celestial, wanted to better himself and
exactly.
progress towards a better alignment.
And you came to me and asked me, instead of saying,
I'm
doing this is how I'm going to do it, and then we have to get an argument.
I think that is a key friction point in character creation between players and a DM, is when a player creates their character just way ahead of time, sets it on the table and says, this is my character, this is their backstory, they've accomplished all of these things, and they do this and they do that and they have this, and they basically eliminate the DM's not only responsibility but right to say no.
Well, and somehow they have 3 18s in their roll scores.
Well, and that's one of my things. I just rolled up a new character just like 2 hours ago. I'm not even kidding. Like 2 hours ago, I rolled up a new character for the 5e campaign I'm playing, and I learned to play 5e, but then I came across a class that I didn't know existed, and I was like, hey, and I approached the DM, I'm like, hey, would it be alright, since we haven't really started the campaign quite yet, to switch out these characters? And so I rolled up a new character, and before I would just use the standard array, which personally, if you're starting a level 1 campaign, my personal opinion is use the standard array. Like don't roll for stats or use point buy. It is as great as rolling for stats can be. I believe in character creation. It creates a power gap rift between players, because you have some players that roll really well, you have some players that roll really badly, and then of course you often get the players that rolled.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, air quotations there.
And their lowest scores of 15.
Right. And so, but I mean, right before we started recording, we were talking about the differences between 3.5 and 5th edition, where we were saying, a lot of the stuff is a little bit lower in 5th edition and a little bit more streamlined and a little bit simpler. And so it makes sense for 5th edition to start with standard array, because then that would put you at a point where that stuff will be a little bit more challenging
Well, and starting
in
at
that
level
world.
one,
Yeah.
Standard
so-
array is great. It's a good
Mhm.
array of scores for a
Mhm.
first level character.
And it fits more into what a first level player would actually
would
be.
actually have. But for this character I rolled up, I rolled for it because in the 2 pre-game sessions that we ran as the group, I quickly realized I was the only person in the group that chose the standard array. Everyone else rolled for their scores because I quickly realized everyone has higher modifiers than me.
Yeah.
And so I rolled for these, and something that as a DM I expect from my players, and I found a lot of DMs don't expect this, and that's why you get a lot of these I rolled these scores players, is I like when rolling scores that my players roll in front of me.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's how I feel with HP rolls, with my rollings, and then scores. And if you roll 2 20s in a row in 3.5, generally 3 20s in a row is insta kill because you have to confirm your crit, unlike 5th edition where it's just automatic crit. And so that third 20,
Oh, really?
it better
I
be.
didn't know that it was an auto crit.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
so
something
3.5,
new every day.
you roll a 20, you hit.
Oh,
But you roll
then
again
you
to
have
confirm it, so you have to
I
do
didn't know
this.
that
Yeah,
5e was an auto.
yeah.
crit.
So 20,
Yeah.
it's auto crit. You just create no confirmations, and so that third 20, if it comes, it has a few times. You're rolling on the table in front of everybody, stuff like that.
Well, the thing that I found is certain weapons they crit on a larger.
Yeah,
scale.
the potential crits and stuff.
So I run the same campaign I run for you guys. I run kind of loosely for my kids. My daughter is an elven fighter, but she uses a bow.
Right.
She rolled 3 19s in a row on her bow,
Yeah.
and it's still 3 crits in a row. So it was an instant kill on a boss.
See, and I think as far as like crit,
3.5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, I
right.
think as far as crits go, that how that works is up to the DM.
Yeah.
Because like the way that I would run that is 3 20s. That's an insta kill.
Right, because the odds of that are.
But if you roll
So
within your crit threat range, the option for an instant kill isn't
No,
in there.
it's just a critical hit.
It's just a chance for a crit, because the range kind of.
Especially if they have keen
Especially
or
if they
improved
have keen or
critical,
something
and so
that
they're running like a
increases that
16 to 20.
Yeah.
Well, because like I play a rogue who has the keen on his thing. This guy's built to just deal crap tons of damage up front, and he's built with the keen enchantment on a rapier. So I'm dealing crits on a crit threat on a 15 to 20.
Right.
I have a 25-ish% chance of critting.
Yeah.
Which on a rapier, it's a triple damage. So it's
It's nice.
insane.
Or if you get the scythe to large
Yeah.
range, it's quadruple
It's times 4
damage.
damage.
Yeah, that times 4 hits hard.
Although the scythe only has the 20 unless you have the keen on it.
Right, and
But
whatnot.
little detracting there again. But
Mm.
sorry, listeners, we're scatterbrained. But I think when you're rolling 4 scores, if you're rolling, that is done in front of a DM.
Absolutely.
And if you don't roll in front of a DM, like today I rolled my scores and my DM obviously wasn't there 2 hours ago. But what I did was I rolled my scores, I wrote them down, and rather than automatically applying them to the character, I took a picture of the scores, sent them to the DM and said, I rolled these scores up. Are these okay, or would you prefer that I re-roll or roll in front of you?
And that's a very appropriate thing to do for the DM.
Well, my campaign, I like the idea of rolling, but I wanted to jump in. I mean, I had a ton of material written. So first, we didn't do a session 0. We just did session 1, and I expected everyone to have their character ready, to have everything, and I did a point buy system. So rather than having to roll, everyone had the same amount of modifiers unless they had, like you as a human, no pluses or minuses, but even then you've...
That's still
Well,
pretty
and
good.
varying plus or minuses from various races.
Yeah, so
but we
I
all
have a pretty
have the
good
same base
modifiers.
and well, maybe not the same. We still have the same totals
Yes.
here and there, but I think personally I prefer point buy or a standard array. Maybe not the D&D standard array, but some form of standard array, because then it puts the players in the position where there isn't a power gap, because I think there's nothing, there's a lot of frustrating things, but it's frustrating as a player when you sit down at a table and you rolled the absolute worst. And while you might have a strong class, you might have a tier 1 class, but your scores are making you the member of the party that everyone has to watch out for.
So, I was teaching some of my teammates how to play. We formed a group on the team, and I saw them all roll theirs, and one of them actually rolled 3 18s, and it was legit. I watched it. I was a witness, and I was the DM, and I was thinking, oh my goodness. And he was playing a druid, and I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. It's the beginning of the end, and so. And, stuff like that can happen. But I do agree with the point-buy system that Steve implemented and what Taylor said, where, I do want more of an emphasis on this one stat than others. And so if I roll, I might not have that same emphasis on that stat.
Well, you might not have the same emphasis, but, for me, and this is speaking both from player and DM point of view, is from a DM point of view, it's almost heartbreaking of sorts when you see a player that rolled badly that is struggling to function in a campaign, whereas you have players that rolled really well that are occupying most of the screen time, so to speak.
And you can see the fun being sucked out of it as well, because they realize I'm not going to be doing anything good for the party.
They can't influence the story as much as other players can, and so they start taking a back seat, and they start losing interest. And so I think point buy or standard arrays are a preferable system in character creation, because it ensures that all of the players start on a level playing field.
Yeah.
And like you said, sometimes one of the party members takes the screen time and one doesn't. And I think as a DM, you want the party to be able to function as a party. That's an expectation you can have.
You want them to be able to function as a party or as a team, not as an NBA team.
Yeah, exactly. And so each person might have a role, or they double team a role. And you want them to be able to accomplish the task, even if they are challenging. And if one of them dies, they die. Just, sometimes it's just pure chance of the roll. But you want them to be a party, and you want them to have a good time together.
Circling back to material exclusion, I think as long as you state up front before the campaign starts that this material is not allowed, I think that's perfectly fine. I think excluding material mid-game is, for lack of a better term, I think as a DM it's a dick move. I think that excluding material because you found it's annoying to you is an unfair way of DMing, and so I think it's important for you as a DM to, before it starts, go over available material and go, okay, you know what, I really don't like this personally because of how it interacts with things, or I don't like this because it doesn't fit into the world or the story that I'm creating.
Yes. I will give out one situation where I had to change something that a player was doing because it was just overpowered. We had a character who was using material that was 3.0 material, which I don't believe I said it wasn't allowed.
It wasn't allowed, but I think at the same time, as players, we should have assumed that because it was a different edition.
Yeah, so, but I had to pull the player aside and say, hey, this is the material from a different edition. I need you to change out one of your spells. Because between the editions, certain things were toned down into the next edition to make it more balanced.
And to be fair, just so our listeners know, because not all listeners would know this, but 3rd edition to 3.5, they're more or less the same edition. They just third edition.
It's kind of all over the place with some
It was
things.
all over the place, and it lacked definition in a lot of its rules, and so they defined rules more clearly in 3.5. But the two systems are mostly compatible, and so there's a lot of crossover use of material. Just some of it doesn't work between the editions, and so for those of you playing 3.5, always ask your DM if 3.0 material is allowed.
Yes. And in certain instances, certain things might be allowed,
But others
but
might not.
others just, I mean, Heartache as a spell, absolutely not.
Whereas you allow me to use Dance of Ruin.
Which, Dance of Ruin, it's the reason that it's allowable is because it can either be really awesome or it can be crap. You could roll 2 1s and then
I could deal 2 damage, or I could deal 40.
yeah.
Like, it's a massive gamble on that.
Which, to be fair, we have a couple of players who, when they hit with their swords, are dealing 40 damage at this point. So it's not.
It's not a ridiculous spell, especially since it costs a 2nd level spell slot.
Yes.
But so yeah, as long as it's up front, I think excluding material is fine, unless said material is severely messing with the game. Like if material is setting the campaign on fire, it needs to be looked at.
Yeah, definitely. Looks like we've really covered just about everything left on the list today.
Yeah, I think we covered everything from our pregame overview section. I guess just looking over the points, is there anything about pregame that you guys think we didn't cover but that's important?
No, because most of it comes into our next podcast is going to be about, and that's kind of the whole world building aspect. The DM should have that at least partially done before to have enough material to work with.
I do, and tacking on to that, I think it's important for pregame and giving expectations to the players is that the DM has enough of the world prepared that before the campaign starts they can give an explanation. For example, the campaign that I am preparing for the other podcast here at Misfortune's Corner, I have already given the players a bit of an overview of what that world, or in this case worlds, looks like. I've given them the overview of what each of these environments looks like and some rules surrounding those. And so I think it's important to get details of that ironed out pre-game so that your players know what they're getting into. For example, because I gave a pre-game overview of these worlds, Steve decided on what race he wanted to be and what world that character was going to be from. And that provides a plethora of roleplay opportunities for me to introduce to the party based on where he decided he's from. And if I didn't provide that information up front, I wouldn't have been able to open that door to that as far in terms of character creation. So
I think my last word of advice as we're wrapping up would be as thorough as you can be going into a campaign in your pregame.
And I would agree, it's much easier to prepare as a DM and a player up front than it is to prepare while you're trying to prepare for the next session.
And as you fall behind, then
The more you have prepared up front, the much easier your job is going to be moving forward.
And I completely agree with that. I try to have 2 or 3 sessions worth of material planned at all times, knowing that it may not go the way that I want to, but at least I got material then that I can use as things come back into track. So I'm not scrambling to prepare every week for the next session.
Yeah. But I think that's all we have for this week. Once again, thank you so much for listening. I'm just going to go right ahead and assume that somebody's listening to this because it makes me feel good.
We're just 3 friends who enjoy talking about this kind of stuff, and so.
And it's something that we all are really passionate about, and I think that the fact that you're listening to a podcast about DMs kind of clues in that you're passionate about it too. I don't know any casual players that would sit and listen to DMs talk about stuff, but I hope moving forward that as we get requests from listeners that we can answer questions that you have about the game. And we don't claim to be experts, but between the 3 of us, I definitely think we have a good amount of experience.
We try our best.
And so on. But on that note, for those of you listening that might have questions for us, you can send us your questions or topics that you want discussed. You can send that to our Twitter account. You can tweet us at Misforcor. That's capital MISFOR, capital COR. Or just look us up, Misfortune's Corner on Twitter. Same thing for Instagram, or you can look us up, find our Facebook page. This podcast, I'm not sure where you're currently listening to it, but will be on YouTube as well as some other podcast platforms that we're going to be looking into, but in future episodes we'll be sure to list out where those are from. But thank you so much for listening to Misfortune's Corner, specifically Heads of House, and we hope to be speaking to you again.